finding your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. Again, at this time, we ask that you please begin finding your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for providing support for this series, and also a big thank you to the DIA for providing the space this evening. The focus of this conversation is the making of a shared regional vision. We have 4 speakers, each representing a unique perspective on what it takes to create that shared vision. And you'll get to hear from each of them. We'll have a panel discussion. Then you'll also have a chance to get your questions answered. And you could submit a question. We have index cards that will be circulating through the audience. You can just raise your hand if you need one. So we'll pick that question up and we'll get to as many questions as time allows this evening. We also encourage you to share your thoughts and insights over the course of this evening. You can use the hashtag DFC ideas on Facebook or Twitter. Now, we are in the basement, so you may not have the best signal, but there is guest Wi-Fi for the DIA, and you can find that by going to your settings and looking at the wireless that's available for you. So now I'd like to welcome the Director of Community Relations here at the Detroit Institute of Arts, Catherine Diamond.
Thank you. And welcome to the Detroit Institute of Arts. I've already been introduced, my name and title. I have the pleasure of being the Community Relations Director here at the museum. I should have said, welcome to your DIA, because since the successful regional millage in 2012, this museum is quite literally your museum. Those of you who supported the millage and provided taxpayer funds to provide general admission have really opened up this museum in a way that it hadn't been in the past. Prior to the millage, as you know, the museum was owned by the city, as I'm sure everybody's heard of over the course of the last year. Owned by the city, the collection was owned by the city, and the museum was really supported by a small but very generous group of donors. And the millage in 2012 really turned us around quite profoundly and literally. All of you, all of the residents in the Tri-County area that voted and own property in the area support us through your millage funds. And it really became evidence of the real first tangible evidence that a regional millage of this type supporting a Detroit-based institution was something that was feasible. We did not necessarily think it was going to be feasible. We had faith. We had a lot of faith, but quite frankly, it was a challenge. At the end of the day, we did lots of work to reach out to the community. And on that millage vote night, we ended up winning by Macomb County in particular by 0.5 percentage point, 1,370 votes. I remember that to this day. So what they told us is we really, although we had a lot of support in Detroit and in Oakland County, we really recognized that we had a lot of work to do. We couldn't let off the pressure of doing the work that we did to achieve the millage. We need to continue this type of work. And what that did was really turn the museum around. We had been a 130-year-old institution that was used to being a 130-year-old institution here in Detroit. We were forced to really look at ourselves differently and recognize that our patrons were different and a different group of patrons, and were expecting something different from us. Over the course of the last 3 years, we worked very, very hard to achieve those goals, working with our community members, with the regional partners throughout the region, and we've learned a lot. We've learned that, again, we can't let up. We need to continue doing this type of work. We need to be giving tangible evidence of why the museum is valuable to people who don't necessarily come here. I've said this, I hope our marketing director isn't here, but don't tell them. But I always say, I'm not concerned if people, we'd love to get people to come to the museum, of course. But I am very, very concerned about making sure people who don't come to the museum support the museum and recognize the value to the region of the museum, of having a museum of our quality and our stature here in the region, to support schools and to support senior learning and to provide inspiration to the community. So although we would love people to come and take advantage of that free admission that they have, really we're working very hard to show the relevance to the community on a day in, day out basis. We recognize, again, that our supporters are different than they were. We've had to transform from an inward-facing museum that was able to do things kind of on our own time and in our own way to an organization that had a lot of external inputs, a lot of people that were asking us to be something that we hadn't been in the past before. And quite frankly, that's been pretty challenging. It's been pretty exciting, but it's been pretty challenging for a lot of us in the museum world. We are also learning that what works in one county doesn't necessarily work in another county. People are different across the whole area. If you think of our service area, regionally, we kind of tend to think about Detroit and sort of the inner suburbs. And our service area goes all the way north to Holly and all the way down to Gibraltar and all the way east to New Baltimore and all the way out to South Lyon. So it's a huge region to really be able to understand the needs and the desires of the community. So the most important thing I think we've learned throughout this entire process is that we need to listen. We need to listen to our constituents, listen to the people that have supported us, listen to those people that supported us so they feel as supported by us as they were to us for the millage. So I look forward to this conversation, and thank you very much. Welcome to the DIA, your DIA.
So my name is Dan Kincaid, the Acting Executive Director for Detroit Future City. I'm particularly excited tonight for a number of reasons. This is it's the culmination of our series. It's the 6th of 6 events. It's exciting to see it all come together tonight, particularly on a really critical topic. I think many of us would agree. Before we get into everything, though, I do want to take a moment just to thank our partners, without whom this series would certainly not have been possible. Our convening groups and our civic capacity working groups, working with us week in and week out to shape these conversations to ensure that they're relevant and inclusive. We don't do anything on our own at Detroit Future City. We do these things in partnership, and our partners have been huge in that regard. Our fiscal sponsor, the Detroit Economic Growth Association, our executive committee and steering committee for their support, our media partner, Michigan Radio, Jen and Joe and Sarah and others, and of course our communications partner in Berg Muirhead. And not last, but certainly not least, our funder, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation with their Detroit leader, Katie Locker. She saw the merit in this series early on. She challenged us to make it better, and she supported us throughout, and for that we'll be eternally grateful. I want to also, though, take time to thank our staff, particularly because we've not done that in this series so far in the first 5 events. And the work we do, the work that many of you do out there, in many ways is not necessarily celebrated, right? In fact, we often step into relatively complex and contentious topics, and we face fairly substantial criticism along the way. While we're not perfect, certainly at Detroit Future City, we are tireless in our effort to advance an inclusive and transformative future for the city. And a series like this is intended to build durable capacity and to ignite informed thinking and challenge preconceived notions. And none of it would be possible without our staff, so for that I am particularly thankful. So with that said, I do want to frame tonight's conversation. We've got 4 great speakers that are going to come in front of you, led through the conversation by Jen White with Michigan Radio. So basically, if we think about where we began in April of this year with this series, we had a robust discussion around what makes great cities, right? We're going to wrap up tonight essentially with what makes a shared regional vision. These two things are intentionally bookended, and a lot of the terrain we've covered in between around equitable growth, around open space, these are the parts, the kind of kit of parts that go into shaping both ends of that. This is important, though. This is a leaping off point for us, and this is a point that we have to spend a lot more time on, a lot more time than what will be covered tonight. It's not by chance that our series is concluding here with the regional focus. It remains perhaps elusive of all facets in our recovery. We've all felt the challenge of achieving a shared direction for our region, and while DFC, the strategic framework itself, laid out the need for an urban agenda within our region, DFC has also been cited and criticized by some for not having a sufficient position on the region. Without the sufficient regional coordination, Metro Detroit has made substantial missteps, impacting all facets of our lives, exacerbating racial, economic, and environmental challenges. While some might say the U.S. Urban regions broadly face similar challenges, we need to only look at places like Denver or Minneapolis or Seattle or Louisville to see how regional coordination and decision-making can, as someone like Myron Orfield or others might show us, contribute to remarkably greater opportunity for everyone. Our challenges here are many. They're fueled certainly by mid-20th century federal policy, you name it, GI Bill, urban renewal, Title I, Title II, Title III, Federal Highway Aid Act, a whole host of things, and a local governance structure that's been really ill-equipped to handle substantial changes over time. We've also had challenges in employment, right? Today, I'm going to frame some bad stuff, and then I'll come in with some good stuff. We have the worst job sprawl nationally. Detroit has really over 77% of its jobs more than 10 miles outside the CBD. Nationwide average is about 43%. This is from Brookings. Economic opportunity is challenging as well. We've got 70% of the jobs in the city held by those that live outside the city, and over 60% of the jobs outside the city held by those who live in the city. When you have significant transportation challenges, as we do, and oftentimes people not having a private vehicle, and a challenge, and I think we're going to talk about this regional transportation system to date, it's hard to make things work. It's hard to ensure that that economy is equitable. Housing and blight. Since 1950, Detroit developers have built an average of 10,000 more dwelling units per year than the market will bear, exacerbating supply and demand problems and contributing to unmanaged and certainly inequitable sprawl. From a transportation perspective to move forward, if you think in 1976, we had on the table a federal opportunity to fund a light rail system across our entire region. That did not happen as certain county partners stepped out of that. It ended up leaving us with a state match in that. We didn't have the federal money, we had the state match, and that, of course, delivered our people mover. Yeah. So as that process has gone along, we've also had some significant environmental challenges, enormous and costly regional combined sewer overflow system that's transmitting billions of gallons of untreated waste into the Great Lakes when we receive just a little over half an inch of rain in an hour. Yet we've seen real opportunities here. We've seen signs of hope. We've just heard how the DIA, all of us together, have worked to support the DIA. We see now the RTA being formed and support for it growing. We see regional responses coming from the governor's office to the White House on behalf of Southeast Michigan following last August historic storms. There are things that are emerging right now, but they're small, they're nascent, and we need to grow them, and hopefully tonight the dialogue can spur us in that direction. But as we begin to lead, as Detroit begins to lead our region's recovery, we need to ask ourselves how we can begin to address both these past missteps and leverage our early collaboration to define a thoughtful and shared regional direction. How can we understand our position, not only within the region of 5 million people, but in an international Great Lakes region that includes 48 million people? How might we start with Windsor, for instance, our partner that actually provides us over 40% of our nursing staff in Detroit? Many may not know that. How can we better steward How can we be better stewards, rather, to 84% of the North American fresh surface water supply in the Great Lakes, 22% of the global fresh surface water supply? How do we drive a shared policy to render sustainable densities region-wide while maintaining sufficient open space to manage stormwater and alleviate heat island effect? How do we fully utilize our global logistics network, which is often overlooked, but it's actually the U.S.'s largest trading port for Canada, with over $1.7 billion worth of goods going across the Ambassador Bridge every day? How do we create a stronger economy that leverages the vestiges of our past, right, while creating an intrinsic, accessible, and innovative economy for the future? How do we reconcile racial disparities across our region? How do we ensure there's enduring equity? And then how do we demand and create real governance at a regional level? We won't have all the answers tonight yet, and they won't be coming from our panelists, but our panelists will help to get us there. They'll begin the conversation. It's a conversation that we're starting now and that we want to continue into the future. Now is not the time to shrink away from the regional debate, but instead it's time to rally ahead. If our past success has been in spite of our regional differences, moving forward, it must be because of our collaboration. We are competing and acting globally. This is not an option, it's imperative. It's also existential, and it is not about us, but about our children. And so I think we need to find motivation in that and have the conviction to move forward together. So we're very excited that you all are here with us tonight. This is going to be a great conversation. We look forward to getting it started with Jen, and from there, we'll get into some good questions too. Pardon me? Thank you. How many people, well, I'm going to try this. Yeah. That was great. Okay. That's a nice sound. It's a transition sound. And with that, we normally have a video. How many people have seen the Ideas for Innovation video out there? That's not too many. Well, if we can cue it up here before it's over, we will do that for you. But in the meantime, I think we'll go ahead and get started with the conversation. All right? Yeah, thanks. Sorry for that awkward transition. Oh, here it is. It's short. Pay attention. Okay, now we can move on. All right.